He signed the papers on a Tuesday. I remember because the mail came late that day, and I was standing at the kitchen window watching the truck pull away when my son walked in holding a folder like it was nothing, like it was a grocery list, like it was something ordinary. He set it on the counter and said, "It's done, Mom. The house is in our names now. You said you wanted to simplify things." I looked at him. I looked at the folder. I looked back at him. I did not say what I was thinking. I had learned by then not to say what I was thinking. I said, "I see." And he nodded, patted my shoulder once the way you pat a dog you are done paying attention to, and walked back down the hall. That was 8 months before everything fell apart, or maybe 8 months before everything finally came together, depending on how you look at it. My name is Erica. I am 67 years old. I live in a small town in Ohio, the kind of town where everybody knows your last name and half of them went to school with your children. I raised 2 boys in this house. I painted the shutters twice. I planted the rose bush by the front steps the spring after my husband Gerald passed. That was 11 years ago, and the rose bush is still there, which is more than I can say for a lot of things that were supposed to last. My older son, Daniel, moved to Columbus after college and married a woman named Britt. I always called her by her full name, Brittany, because that was the name her mother gave her, and I believed in using it. She did not seem to care either way. She did not seem to care about much that had to do with me. My younger son, Kevin, stayed close. He lived 40 minutes away and called every Sunday and remembered my birthday without being reminded. He is a quiet man, Kevin. He takes after Gerald in that way. He does not say much, but when he says something, he means it. It was Daniel and Brittany who came to me 3 years ago with the plan. They sat across from me at this very kitchen table, the one Gerald and I bought at an estate sale in 1987, and they explained it calmly and reasonably, the way people explain things when they have rehearsed it, when they have decided the answer before they ask the question. The property taxes were going up, they said. The maintenance on a house this size was too much for one person, they said. What if something happened to me? What if I needed care? Wouldn't it be smarter, wouldn't it be safer to put the house in both their names so they could help manage things? They were not asking for ownership, they said. They were asking to help. I was 64 years old. I had lived alone for 6 years. I had managed the taxes, the roof repair, the furnace replacement, the broken gutters, the cracked driveway. I had managed all of it, alone, with the money Gerald and I had saved over 40 years of careful living. But Daniel was my son, and he was sitting across from me, with his hands folded and his voice steady, and his wife nodding beside him, and I wanted to believe that he was asking because he loved me. So I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I called Kevin. Kevin was quiet on the phone for a long time, and then he said, "Mom, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do." Which was not a yes and not a no, but it stayed with me. In the end, I signed. I told myself it was a practical decision. I told myself that family takes care of family. I told myself that Daniel was not Gerald, but he was Gerald's son, and Gerald had been a good man, and surely some of that had passed down. I want to tell you what happened after that, but I need you to understand something first. I need you to understand that I was not a foolish woman. I had taught school for 28 years. I had balanced a household budget through 2 recessions. I had raised 2 children mostly on my own after Gerald got sick the first time in 2003. I was not the kind of woman who gets taken advantage of. I want you to understand that because what I am about to tell you is the kind of thing that happens to women who are not foolish, who are not weak, who are not naive. It happens anyway. It happens because love makes you want to believe. And wanting to believe is the oldest vulnerability there is. The first thing I noticed was the account. Gerald and I had a joint savings account at the local credit union, the kind of old-fashioned account where you get a paper statement in the mail every month. After Gerald passed, I kept it in both our names for a long time because I could not bring myself to change it. Eventually, I updated it, and the account became mine alone. Or I thought it did. 3 months after Daniel and Brittany's names went on the deed to the house, I got a statement that showed a withdrawal I had not made. $400 cash from the branch on Millfield Road, which was 12 minutes from Daniel and Brittany's house and 47 minutes from mine. I called the credit union. There had been an update to the account access, they told me. A secondary holder had been added. They could not tell me more over the phone. I drove there the next morning. Brittany's name was on my account. I sat in the chair across from the branch manager, a young woman named Heather who looked genuinely sorry, and I asked her how that had happened. She pulled up the records. It had been done in person 3 weeks earlier. The authorization had been signed. I knew my signature. I had been writing it for 67 years. That was not my signature. I did not cry in Heather's office. I thanked her, and I walked out to my car, and I sat in the parking lot for 11 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I sat down, and I looked at it again when I started the engine. 11 minutes, and in those 11 minutes I thought about Gerald. I thought about the savings account we had opened together at 26 years old. I thought about every dollar we had put into it, every month, for 4 decades. The vacations we did not take, the new car we did not buy, the careful, patient, ordinary discipline of 2 people who believed that the future was worth protecting. I thought about my son. Then I drove home, and I made a phone call that was not to Daniel. I called a woman named Patricia. Patricia and I had been friends since our children were in elementary school together. Her husband had passed 2 years before Gerald, and she had navigated her estate on her own, and she had done it well. She gave me the name of her attorney. His name was Robert Callahan. His office was in a town 40 minutes east, far enough from here that I was unlikely to run into anyone I knew in the parking lot. I called Robert Callahan's office the next day. I want to be honest with you. I want to tell you that I walked into that attorney's office certain and clear and unafraid. But I did not. I walked in with my hands cold and a folder of documents pressed against my chest like a shield, and I sat down and I told Robert Callahan everything, and by the end of it my voice was steady, but my hands were not. He listened without interrupting. He asked 3 questions, then he sat back and he looked at me and he said, "Mrs. Erica, I think you already know what's been happening here. The question now is what you want to do about it." What I wanted to do was not anything I could say out loud. What I did instead was start paying attention. I began keeping a notebook, not a diary, nothing sentimental, a record, dates, amounts, observations. I wrote down the date of the unauthorized account change. I wrote down the withdrawal amounts. I wrote down the conversation at the kitchen table, as much of it as I could remember word for word. I wrote down every visit Daniel and Brittany made to the house after they were added to the deed, which visits they had and had not called ahead about, which rooms they walked through, without asking. I wrote down the day Brittany asked me where I kept the deed documents. I wrote down the day she asked a second time. I brought the notebook to Robert Callahan once a month. He made copies. He kept them in a file with my name on it. Meanwhile, I said nothing to Daniel. I cooked dinner when they came to visit. I asked about their jobs, their friends, their plans for the holidays. I listened to Brittany talk about the kitchen renovation they were doing in Columbus, the new countertops, the custom cabinets, the contractor who was costing more than they expected. I nodded. I refilled her coffee. I did not say, "I know where that money is coming from." This went on for 7 months. In the 7th month, Daniel came to visit alone. Brittany had a work thing, he said. He sat at the kitchen table, and for a moment he looked so much like Gerald that I had to look away. He told me he had been thinking about my situation. He said the word situation carefully, gently, the way you use a word you have chosen on purpose. He said that the house was a lot for me to manage, that the property taxes were going to go up again next year, that he and Brittany had been talking and they thought it might make more sense for them to take over the management of the property officially. He had some paperwork, he said, just to formalize things, make it cleaner. He slid a document across the table. I picked it up. I read it slowly. I set it down. "I'll need some time to look this over," I said. "Of course," he said. No rush. And he smiled, the smile I remembered from when he was 9 years old and had broken something and was hoping I would not notice. He left an hour later. I stood at the window and watched his car back out of the driveway and turn down the road. Then I called Robert Callahan. That was a Thursday. By the following Tuesday, I had signed nothing, and Robert Callahan had filed a petition with the county court to review the property deed transfer based on a procedural issue he had identified. A legitimate one, the kind of thing that should have been caught the first time but was not. He had also contacted the credit union about the account access with documentation. I did not tell Daniel. I want to tell you about a morning about 3 weeks after that Tuesday. It was early, barely light, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee and my notebook when my phone rang. It was Daniel. He was not using his careful voice. He said that he had received a notice from the county. He said he did not understand what was happening. He said, "Mom, what did you do?" I looked out the window at the rose bush. It was November, and the roses were gone, but the canes were still there, bare and dark and stronger than they looked. I said, "I protected myself, Daniel. That's what I did." He started to say something else. I let him say it. When he finished, I said, "I think we should talk about this in person with Robert Callahan present. I'll have his office send you the information." Then I said goodbye and I hung up. I am not going to tell you that was easy. I am not going to tell you my heart was not pounding when I set that phone down. He was my son. He had been a little boy in this house. He had sat at this table and eaten cereal and done his homework and asked me to check for monsters under his bed, and I always did. And there were never any monsters. And I had believed for a very long time that meant there never would be. But I had also sat in a parking lot for 11 minutes and learned something about what I was capable of. The meeting happened 2 weeks later. It was not comfortable. Brittany did not come. Daniel came with their own attorney, a young man who seemed to be reconsidering his career choices about 30 minutes into the conversation. Robert Callahan was thorough, and he was calm, and he was very good at his job. By the end of that meeting, the process of restoring the property deed to my name alone had begun. The unauthorized account access was being addressed separately through the credit union's fraud process. There were things that could not be undone, money that was spent and gone. Robert had been honest with me about that from the beginning. Not all of it was recoverable, but the house was mine. It had always been mine. And now the paperwork would say so again. I did not speak to Daniel for 2 months after that meeting. He called once in December on a Sunday. He did not leave a message. I saw his name on my screen, and I sat with the phone in my hand until it stopped ringing. I was not ready. I did not know if I would ever be ready. I did not know yet what kind of relationship, if any, came after something like this, and I was not willing to find out before I was strong enough to find out on my own terms. Kevin came for Christmas. He did not ask about Daniel. He helped me hang the wreath on the front door, and we ate the same meal we had been eating on Christmas since the boys were small, and he washed the dishes without being asked, the way his father always had. Before he left, he stood in the hallway and put on his coat, and he looked at me and said, "I'm glad you're okay, Mom." I said, "I am okay." And I meant it, not in a performance way, not in the way you say things to reassure people. I meant it the way you mean things after you have found out what you are actually made of, which is usually stronger material than you expected. There is something I want to say to you before I finish. I have been thinking about how to say it. If you have someone in your life who is asking you to sign things, to simplify things, to just make it easier for everyone, I am not telling you to assume the worst. Most families are not like this. Most children are not like this. Kevin is not like this. But I am telling you, read what you sign. Keep copies of everything. Know what your accounts say every single month. Have a name, one name, of someone outside your family who you trust and who knows the law, not because you expect to need them, because you hope you never do, and you want to be ready anyway. The rosebush will bloom again in May. It does every year. It does not need me to tell it to. It just waits and holds on. And when the time is right, it does exactly what it was always going to do. I think about that sometimes, about what it means to be something that holds on. I have been holding on for 67 years. I have learned that the holding is not weakness. The holding is the whole thing. If you are holding on right now, I want you to know that I see you, and I want you to stay. Thank you for being here with me today. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to stay a little longer, there are more stories right here. I will see you in the next one.